Hello there. When I started doing watercolour a few years ago to try and help my memory, as it was something I hadn't done before, I found probably the same thing that many of you do, is that the paper bubbles and you need to stretch it. Now I tried wetting it and stretching it on a board and using tape, but I didn't find it successful. And having looked on the internet, there was lots of very expensive paper stretchers. However, I've made my own, which I use for the larger size paper, and I'm going to show it to you. It didn't cost me very much. In fact, you'd be surprised what I used to make it. But I'm going to just put it here and show you. So the first thing is, you'll take one look at this and think, good God, what's this? Well, believe it or not, that's a plastic breadboard. My wife and I used it in our kitchen for many, many years. Well stained, of course, well cut. But I used this as the backing for my board, paper stretcher. Now if I turn it over, you'll see a piece of glass, which was actually a table mat. A glass table mat, and you can see the inlaid picture on the glass, and underneath this are two ordinary CD boxes. Now the reason I've done the CD boxes is because it was convenient height wise. One of the things you have to do is trap your paper. You put your paper, your wet paper, you stretch it over, and you have to feed it under the edges and trap it in so it stretches. Now the thing I did this with was ordinary plastic tubing. This is the sort you use for siphoning your wine or your anything, fish tanks and similar. Now what I've done is the distance between the breadboard and the glass and the plastic tubing. The plastic tubing is very slightly larger, so when you push it in, it gets trapped. Now, when you put this in with the wet paper, the thickness of the paper makes this gap even smaller. So as you push the paper over and push these in, it traps the paper. So pushing it in, trapping the paper. So that was why I modelled the width across here on the plastic tubing, hence the two CDs, which are just stuck on with, funnily enough, just ordinary silicone sealant. Nothing fancy, looks pretty crap, doesn't it? So when you're fitting it, you've wet your paper, stretch your paper over and feed your paper underneath. Now if you are using a paper this size, you'll probably notice that it's bigger. Okay? I made this on a convenient size which covers most of the things. So when this paper's on, there's quite a bit of an overhang. So you might have to trim a piece off. The other thing you might have to do is when you've got it over is you might have to just diagonally trim the corners, just so you can fold the paper underneath. Now I'm not going to do it for you because I'm not blowing away a piece of expensive Bockingford. But when the paper's wet and you've stretched the paper over, you'll notice I have two long pieces of tube and two shorter ones. And what I tend to do is I tend to go from the top first, and I feed the top one in and I push this in and it will trap the paper underneath this edge. Now as long as it's in, it doesn't have to be straight. You could probably find an easier way, but the thing about the plastic pipe is it's flexible, because not all the papers are the same thickness. And what I tend to do is I do the top one, smooth it across, and then feed the bottom one in. So again, I just feed the bottom one and it traps the paper underneath. So your paper will be folded underneath it. Now I've left enough gap for a big Bockingford sheet, but you may just want to trim your paper back. It depends on what size top you've used. And then when you've done that, you feed the bottom sheets in. See how that slightly traps it, trapping in there, pressing in? And the same for this one. Now make sure as you're doing it, it doesn't double back on you. So you push it in and that's it. Now that paper's stretched. Ideally I do it the day before so it dries. But you don't have to. Now you're thinking, what sort of pictures will he have from that? Well, if you give me a second, this is one I haven't done on there, and you see the wrinkles in it. I did this as a flat board. Now this was stretched on the board. Notice, it's flat, no wrinkles. And this one, again, we'll pull this one out. This, stretched on the board. In fact, I'll probably bring it up to the camera and be easier to see. This is the back of the paper, see? Where it's been folded over. There's the edges. After I've taken it off, I've obviously trimmed the overhead, the extra off. So this hasn't been framed, this is just as painted. So the board stretched out, or this been stretched on that board. I'll put it on there so you can see, just to see exactly how it was when it was fitted. So when this was on the board, with the edges folded over, there we go. And that is the paper stretcher. So, just use your imagination. Think what it is you want to do. What did this cost me? Well, the breadboard was free. The pipe, funnily enough, I had it left over in my fish tanks, never used it. But it's probably, if you're talking dollars, couple. If you're talking pounds, probably one. CD cases, I'm sure there's plenty of you who've got empty CD cases or similar. The piece of glass on the top, admittedly, this has not got sharp edges because it was table mat that we stopped using. But I'm sure you could find something else. You don't have to use glass. Whatever it is has to be flat and smooth. And I use this because this is a perfectly level surface. So there you are. One homemade, very cheap paper stretcher for doing your watercolours. Hope you found this helpful. I'm not a good painter, I'm just learning, but this I found very helpful, and also I can sit it on my knee. It also fits into my sort of briefcase for taking round with me, so very useful, very cheap, and I'm pretty sure you'll come up with your own ideas, but that's all you need to do. Well, it's bye from me. Hopefully I might make another video at some time. Bye again. See you around.